At the end of 1995, Neil Young lost his longtime friend and producer, David Briggs, to cancer. It was a devastating loss. Briggs was only 51 years old, and the pair had been musically collaborating and conspiring together since 1968. Now, as 1996 dawned, Young was already back in the studio making a record with Crazy Horse, but not making a Neil Young record. This time he was the producer, under the alias Phil Perspective, helping the Horse make an otherwise Youngless album. Crazy Horse had released 5 albums without Neil Young since 1971, the last one being Left for Dead in 1989, and this was meant to be number 6. However, according to Frank Poncho Sampedro, the album was never finished. Our producer, Phil Perspective, he said, didn't stick around. He turned back into Neil Young and did a Neil Young record instead. Before the project turned back into a Neil Young and Crazy Horse album though, Young went back to basics with the band. He planned a series of very small, unannounced local gigs. Previously, they had warmed up for big tours in smaller venues like the Catalyst in Santa Cruz, but this time, this wasn't small enough for Young. Too big, he complained to his tour manager. That's over 100 people. It ended up being so small, his management company weren't even involved. They sold the tickets on the door. They ended up playing 14 dates at the old Princeton Landing bar in Princeton by the Sea, Half Moon Bay, California. Only 50 wristbands were sold to the public for each date, although attendees did say there was definitely more than 50 people there every night. Officially, the bar's capacity was 150, but that was on an average day when there wasn't a stage taking up a quarter of the room. Billing themselves as the Echoes, they began there on the 18th of March, playing 4 nights in a row, treating the lucky few who could squeeze into the bar to seldom heard classics like Wonderin', Danger Bird, Stupid Girl and Bite the Bullet, along with a selection of more familiar favourites such as Like a Hurricane and Down by the River. For those who witnessed these gigs, it was not just an unforgettable experience. According to one fan who wrote a review at the time, when you're practically on stage with the band, it becomes a transcendental experience. One attendee went down to the bar earlier in the day and hung around while the band sound checked. The patrons that were already there were asked to leave the bar, and they could hear Neil Young and Crazy Horse playing a new song, Big Time, through the walls. The first 4 shows were advertised outside the venue with small black and white posters just saying The Echoes, repeat performances beginning March the 18th. But after the first show, word got out that it was in fact Neil Young and Crazy Horse, and soon fans were lining up every day to secure a wristband to see the show. As a gesture in honour of their recently departed friend, David Briggs, the stage lighting for these shows comprised of just a dozen or so candles placed at various points on amps and speakers around the stage. This would be one of the many elements of the Princeton shows that would be carried forward and recreated on the later official tour of Europe and North America. For Poncho, he said that these gigs were the best thing that ever happened to the Horse, saying that it had made them a band again. There were other gestures in honour of David Briggs at these shows as well. Songs from Briggs' favourite Horse record, Zuma, featured heavily, and Young also resurrected When Your Lonely Heart Breaks, a song from the Life album that Briggs had been trying to push Young to work harder on, as he felt it had great potential which they weren't living up to. The band decided to finally give the song the treatment it deserved. He was really pissed that we didn't do a great record with that one. Young said, "It makes you want to do it really well now." And technically, David Briggs was still in the building. Poncho had taken some of his ashes and stashed them in one of his amps. "David's coming on the road," he said. After the first 4 shows, Young and the Horse began recording new songs just up the road at Young's ranch. These included Big Time, Slip Away and Loose Change. After a further 4 shows at Princeton Landing, they did some more recording, and then the album Broken Arrow was completed, with the final track being added to the album being a cover of Jimmy Reed's Baby What You Want Me to Do, recorded live with a bootleg level of quality at the tiny Half Moon Bay bar. Released in July 1996, Broken Arrow received almost universally bad reviews, ending a 7-album run of basically being the critics' darling. People magazine declared it one of the worst albums of the year, and Spin magazine, having spent the past few years singing his praises constantly, was now accusing him of complacency and attempting just to ride out his career on past glories. One review said that the album lacks any real centre of gravity, it meanders, indulges in whimsy, and is largely dull. Young, it seems, had been expecting this. They'll shit on this one, he said before the release of the album. There's enough weaknesses in this one for them to go for it. What the critics failed to pick up on, however, is that the album was deliberately constructed this way. It's purposefully vulnerable and unfinished, said Young, and I wanted to get one under my belt without David. Young's critics misinterpreted the album as a sign that without Briggs, Neil and the Horse were just lost, unable to recapture the lightning in a bottle glories of their former days. But in reality, Broken Arrow is the sound of a band finding themselves again, getting closer to the source of their inspiration than ever before. Young said in his memoir, Waging Heavy Peace, that at their last meeting before his passing, he had asked Briggs for any advice he had for him and his music going forward. Just make sure to have as much of you in the recording as you can, he said. Stay simple. No one gives a shit about anything else. He told me to keep it simple and focused, he said. Have as much of my playing and singing as possible and to not hide it with other things that aren't necessary. Be great or be gone. His famous phrase echoes in my head. I have to remember that for sure. In light of this, contrary to what the critics were saying, Young was actually following Briggs' advice to the letter, and as such, Broken Arrow is actually the perfect tribute to his mercurial, mysterious brother, as he put it. The album's opener, Big Time, is somewhat autobiographical, relating Young's musical beginnings and his first journey from Canada to California in the mid-60s, getting in an old black car, gonna take a ride so far, to the land of suntan lotion. There he meets the ocean's daughter, who waves to him and calls him over. Now, you could interpret this as representing a real person Young met in California, but I believe the ocean's daughter is representative of the muse, inspiration, to whom Young would devote himself entirely. From that time onwards, Young has often associated inspiration for his work with travel or journeys. He once said about his career that he always had his bags packed, ready to follow the muse. The chorus of the song, I'm still living the dream we had, for me it's not over. It's not just personally poignant, sung in memory of their recently departed friend, but also a reminder to everyone, fans and critics alike, that for Young, the 60s never actually ended. Whatever it was that he started doing back then, he was still doing it, whatever else is going on in the world. Young acknowledges how his own demons often divert him from his dream, talking about the enemy inside of me. However, he does always know how to get back on track, talking about the youthful fountain. It's following the muse that has kept him young, as fresh inspiration, when it comes, always brings with it renewal and rebirth. Talking about you and me, he sings, talking about eternity, talking about the big time. I think he is addressing Briggs directly, and for Young and Briggs, the big time wasn't just about money, success, fame or notoriety. It was about creating music that was an authentic expression of what was happening, and in this regard they succeeded many times over. And for Young, it's a pursuit that never ends. The big time is also another way of describing eternity, the biggest time of all. And as of the time of recording this video, in January 2026, nearly 30 years after the release of this song, Neil Young is still living the dream they had. For him, it's still not over. Musically, Big Time is, well, big, expansive. The extended jams really do give the impression of traversing huge distances, long roads, wide horizons. Loose Change comes next, and also finds Young standing in the middle of his life, looking back as well as forwards at the possible roads to take. Some roads bring renewal, some roads hide and wait, he sings. Following on from Big Time, he's about to take another journey, loose change in my pocket, future in my hand. But he's also wary of becoming sidetracked, too many distractions for me to understand. Musically, the band stretch out even more here, hanging on to that one F chord for the last 5 minutes of the song, with Young soloing in the C major scale, which I'm told, is the Lydian mode. This creates a compelling unresolved tension to the jam and gives the band an ocean of space to play around in. It's one of the Horse's best jamming tunes, and quite frankly, even 9 minutes feels a bit too short, in my opinion. There are also extended moments of repeated chord phrases and muted strumming that almost sound post-punk at times. Slip Away comes next, which lyrically is perhaps inspired by the gigs at Princeton Landing. The smoke in the barroom nights, the faces at the window. When they played at the small bar, all of the windows would be covered up, apart from one to the left of the stage, which Young requested to be left uncovered so people could get a glimpse of the band as they played. And that seems to have prompted that lyric. And when the music started, he sings, she just slipped away. A simple celebration of losing your mind to music. Musically, the song is another long jam. Young had never started an album like this before, with 3 lengthy jam songs, one after the other. Before, usually they would be spaced out in the track listing, such as on Everybody Knows This Is Nowhere, for example. This time, the jam hangs on the D chord for around 3 or 4 minutes, and there's not many bands that can play one chord for that length of time and still hold your attention, but the Horse does it every time. Change in Highways was originally written in 1974 and was recorded at Poncho's first ever recording session with the band, but it was never worked on further. Poncho, however, was fond of it and kept the song in his back pocket, whipping it out one day at the 1996 sessions. Young, who had completely forgotten the song by this time, agreed they should do it. Scattered, brackets, Let's Think About Living, close brackets, often gets maligned as one of the weaker songs on the album, but it is in fact a touching tribute to David Briggs. Like a comet painted on the sky, like an old soul, over darkness you'll fly. This Town is definitely one of the weaker songs on the album. There's not much to it, and most likely that is the point. I'm not asleep when I'm lying down, Young sings. I'm asleep when I'm walking around this town. But again, I view this through the lens of the band's grief for their departed friend. It describes a state of numbness. The album's sole acoustic song, Music Arcade, features a vocal from Young so quiet you can hear his lips moving during the song as he sings the words. It's the most vulnerable song on the album. If This Town was a song about a cloudy state of numbness, then this is the next stage of grief, more awake, facing down some very sobering thoughts. Have you ever been lost? Have you ever been found out? He whispers, his fingers barely touching the strings of the guitar as he strums. The song also features a return of the Comet from Scattered. There's a comet in the sky tonight. Makes me feel like I'm alright. The song is purposefully jumbled up. He feels alone, then down, then good, then alright, then down again. A little bit high, a little bit low, just like Scattered again. One of the main reasons why this album got such bad reviews, in my opinion, is because of the sequencing of the songs, starting off with 3 long extended jams before the second half of the album gets increasingly quieter, more vulnerable, more downbeat. The songs get shorter and simpler until he's whispering over a barely strummed guitar. As with Sleeps with Angels and Mirrorball, the sequencing of this album is actually one of the most brilliant things about it. The trio of Scattered, This Town and Music Arcade all coming together towards the end makes complete sense, as they all relate and allude to each other lyrically and absolutely succeed in painting the picture that Young wants you to see. After this, the only place to go is back to Princeton Landing, where we get a cover of Jimmy Reed's classic Baby What You Want Me to Do, recorded live at one of the shows at the tiny bar that effectively spawned this album. Seemingly recorded on a single stereo mic from the audience, it sounds like a bootleg, and in fact some of the bootlegs sound better than this, but it is in its own way the perfect way to end the album. Remember what Briggs said to Young the last time they met. Keep it simple and focused. Have as much of your playing and singing as possible. Don't hide it with any other things. Well, mission accomplished. And while it certainly may not be the best album they ever made together, it might be, however, in my opinion, Neil Young and Crazy Horse in their purest, rawest, most vulnerable form. It's 100% Horse all the way through, wherever you slice into it. You get all the good bits mixed in with the shitty bits, and that ain't for everyone, so no wonder the critics weren't too hot for it. But still, the sudden fall from critical favourite to last week's news does seem quite surprising, now, looking back. Musically, the album wasn't so much different from the previous offerings of the 90s, but as Jimmy McDonough noted in his book Shaky, it probably wasn't due to the music itself, but more the fact that in the past few years, he wrote, Young had been in the spotlight without a break, and people were a little worn out. Young, of all people, had let himself get overexposed. Before the album was released, when the band was still playing dates at the Princeton Landing, on June the 4th they played the entire album from start to finish, from Big Time through to Jimmy Reed. After a few more shows there, and 2 at the Catalyst in Santa Cruz, the band headed over to Europe and played Switzerland, Germany, Scandinavia, the Netherlands, France, Belgium, Ireland and the UK, where they memorably, for me anyway, performed an absolute monster set at the Phoenix Festival in England, which was shown on TV. They then headed back over to North America for more dates, and they basically continued touring on and off for the rest of 96, and then continued through to the summer of 97. And in 1997, the live album Year of the Horse was released, accompanied by a movie of the same name, directed by Jim Jarmusch. The live album, like Broken Arrow, received mostly negative reviews across the board, so it was official now. The Horse were no longer flavour of the month. The grunge bubble had long since burst, but of course Neil and the Horse were still doing what they had always done, and in fact had never done it better. Having taken Briggs' advice seriously, they were now closer to the source than ever before. The versions here of Barstool Blues, Danger Bird, Sedan Delivery and the newer songs are equal to or even better than the originals in my opinion in some cases. The electrified version of Pocahontas here is absolutely superb and brings it back closer to its original conception. When Young and the Horse first recorded it back in 1975, it was in this arrangement, albeit in a different key. Young's vocal is impassioned, and also, does anyone else think he sounds a bit like Michael Stipe on this song at times? This song really reminded me of the huge influence of Neil Young on REM. But for me, the absolute highlight is Danger Bird. Emerging from the tail end of the previous song, Scattered, the song's opening riff with its famous windshield wiper guitar noises, the song slowly rouses itself, then tentatively at first takes flight, and then it soars, and then it ascends into the stratosphere. This is why I can't take people seriously if they dismiss this album. It contains some truly transcendent moments like this, and like Broken Arrow represents the purest form of Neil Young and Crazy Horse currently available on the market. Just lie back and smell the horse. Sedan Delivery delivers on all fronts. It somehow manages to be even more punky and demented than any previous versions. Not bad for a bunch of 50-year-old grandpas. The version of When Your Lonely Heart Breaks, which I think was recorded at Princeton Landing, judging from the sound of the audience, does infinitely more justice to the song than the version on Life that David Briggs was so unhappy with. Here, the band are fully emotionally committed to the song, and it shows in the playing, in the vocals. The 2 albums, Broken Arrow and Year of the Horse, taken together, despite whatever the critics said, do in fact form the perfect tribute to their fallen friend. With every extended jam, as Poncho put it, we were playing him on his way. The Year of the Horse movie, directed by Jim Jarmusch, is part documentary, part concept movie, all shot on Super 8 and video cameras. Back in 1995, Young had recorded a free-form improvised soundtrack to Jarmusch's existential western Dead Man, starring Johnny Depp. The soundtrack album was released in March of 1996, and it was Young's first attempt at a full movie score, and is still an enjoyable listen to this day. For those of us that take great pleasure in hearing Young noodling around on his old guitar, it's essential listening. Like many of Jarmusch's films, Year of the Horse has a loose structure and jumps back and forward in time. The 2 main periods it focuses on are 1996 and 1976. The interviews in the film are casual and often extremely funny, introducing the band members as if posing for police mugshots. The movie paints an authentic picture of the band as more than just a sound, as Elliot Roberts puts it. These guys have been together almost 30 years, he said. So what these guys bring to the table when they show up is literally their lives with Neil. We've been through everything with them. The film also features some scenes from the then unreleased 1986 documentary Muddy Track, so we get an authentic cross-section of the band through 3 different decades. The film is a treasure trove of rare snippets, including a cameo from Neil's dad. We get to see the band with their guard down, laughing with each other, smoking joints backstage in Glasgow, setting fire to plastic flowers in hotels, having blazing rows, and of course full-length song performances, including the rarely played Stupid Girl. Jimmy McDonough in Shaky did not think much of the movie, saying it was hopelessly soft and full of phony camaraderie. But I think this is a bit off the mark and needlessly harsh. I think the movie is very true to the spirit of the band and tells their story accurately, and for me remains to this day the definitive portrait of Neil and the horse. And the music, of course, is fantastic, despite whatever the critics have to say about it. And then, after the almost constant touring of 96 and 97, Neil Young then did nothing in 98, apart from Farm Aid and 2 Bridge School benefit concerts, all in the October, after a full-on 90s that had seen Young come back to the top of the rock pile with a series of amazing albums. 1998 marked the first year since 1984 where no new Neil Young album was released and no tour, not even a small local one. So, as the 21st century approached, what would the future hold for the 50-something-year-old Neil Young? Was he now winding down, preparing for retirement? Would we only see the occasional tour or album from now on, every few years? Well, no. This is Neil Young we're talking about. Believe it or not, the next decade would have just as many albums, projects, movies, controversies, and as much new music as any decade so far. In fact, if anything, it has even more. So we will be taking a look at what happened next in the next video in this series. So stay tuned, subscribe to this channel, give us a thumbs up, check out our Patreon for extra stuff. Consider supporting us by buying tickets to our gigs or buying some merch. Links to everything are in the description below this video. But until the next video, that's all from me on this one. Bye for now.